Phoenix Point, man. It's had a weird journey. It was announced as a turn-based tactics game with a strategic layer, aka the XCOM model, directed by none other than Julian Gollop himself, director of the original XCOM UFO Defense. The first demo showed off a sort of terror from the deep inspired concept with loads of giant enemy crabs, and hype comes easily. It was niche, obviously, but that niche had a dedicated enough following that people were pretty excited. Then, the news dropped. Phoenix Point was one of the first high-profile titles nabbed as an Epic Games Store exclusive. I'm not really here to dive into the controversy surrounding the platform itself, but it took an instant torpedo to the hype. Like, no hate on Julian Gollop for taking the deal, make your bag, man, but you just need to take a look at the top posts on the Phoenix Point subreddit to see, well... Epic Games Store, spyware, tracking, don't agree to the new terms. You guys got the money, but destroyed your PSA. Congratulations. The fundamental issue is that without its backers, the snapshot was not on it's going to sell out to Epic in the first backers are On top of all of that, Phoenix Point suffered from one of the most half-baked releases I've seen in recent memory that didn't involve a game being outright broken. It wasn't buggy or anything, it was just kind of incomprehensible. Also hard. Really, really hard. It was the kind of game that had you staring down multiple enemies that each felt like they should be their own boss encounter before you knew which end of the gun was which, so it all just kinda got overwhelming. I bought it at launch and didn't play it for very long. It felt like the game was being overly hostile to live up to its legacy, so after a few hours I set it down. I rarely heard anyone else talking about it, and even when it got a Steam release, the reviews weren't kind to it. And that was nearly the end of my journey with the highly anticipated Phoenix Point. But... in the following months, I'd open the Epic Launcher once or twice a week to get a free game and generally not do anything else with it but play Celeste, but I'd often notice that I wasn't able to close it right away because some massive download was happening. What felt like half a dozen times in a row, Phoenix Point was downloading a huge update the size of one of those classic TF2 content drops. Eventually I had to ask, okay, you've basically downloaded the entire game a second time by this point, do you have anything to show for it? It turns out, yeah. Phoenix Point is subtly, yet at the same time substantially different now. It's still fundamentally the same game, but the feel of it is completely different. So much so that I wonder if it had launched like this, would it have done anything to save it from premature community death? Maybe not, since the Epic deal could have already done it in. Still, now seems like a good time to see if this game lived up to its legacy. If you're not familiar with the XCOM franchise, then go look up the Wikipedia page, and next time remember to do your homework before class. It's a series that I have a lot of history with, despite it literally being as old as I am. Everyone has one or two games that they're always chasing the feel of, and the original XCOM is one of mine. I'm sure those of you that have played it get what I mean when I say despite its flaws, there's a certain quality to both the chaotic gunfights and the scrappy, scrounging base management that's hard to reproduce. Other games in and out of the franchise never quite get it right, whether they intend to or not. Not that they still can't be excellent games, but you always find yourself longing for that little bit of soul left behind. So Phoenix Point certainly had some promise with Gollop at the helm, and since way fewer people played it, this game I'll actually take some time to summarize. Short version, XCOM with crabs. Long version, there's an outbreak of a disease with a name that's a bit awkward to say in 2022, and a bunch of people wander into the sea and re-emerge as hybridized sea creatures. Society collapses and people retreat into shelters run by three major factions. New Jericho, hardline militarists and crab haters run by Elon Bezos. Synedrian, Marx-quoting bleeding heart hippies trying to infight their way into making a post-apocalyptic utopia. And the Disciples of Anu, the obligatory, hey, what if we worship the crabs? And at the center of it all, the Phoenix program, remnants of the totally not Illuminati who are out to find the source of the virus and save humanity. The strategic gameplay is a bit like UFO Defense mixed with XCOM 2. You have multiple bases around the world, but spend most of your time flying your transports around to various points of interest, scavenging for resources or networking with friendly factions. Every once in a while it's time for a ground mission, and we all know the song and dance by now. Take a dropship full of your guys to bring about some old Xeno demise. You have your turn where you move and shoot, and maybe use an ability too. But then your enemy gets the same, and you have bullshit RNG to blame. And if your soldier gets whacked, he's dead, he ain't coming back, and then you sigh and reload a save game. One of the interesting things about Phoenix Point is that nailing down the exact identity it's going for isn't as easy as you'd think. The obvious answer here is just a modern, more faithful reboot of UFO Defense, but I'm not sure I buy that. For one, that's basically Xenonauts. Second, Phoenix Point takes an awful lot of cues from the Firaxis games, particularly XCOM 2, for something that's ostensibly a return to the good old days. We have the XCOM 2 style exploration gameplay as mentioned, plus the faction relations like in War of the Chosen. The ground gameplay is generally more old school with a modern coat of polish, but it still has things like special soldier abilities and a lot of similar mission types. And yet none of those connections are quite so direct. Yes, you have the flying around, but there's another layer where you have to scan to reveal locations and some can be returned to. The faction system is more complex than just a way of getting unique soldiers, with a multi-layered alliance system and most of the tech tree being locked behind having good relations with them. And the soldier skills have this point system that lets you use soldier XP as well as a big shared XP pool to— oh wait, never mind, that's just War of the Chosen again. Still though, we can gather from this that Phoenix Point's intentions aren't going straight for the nostalgia play, or to be overtly innovative in its own right. Most games seek to either evolve a formula or reinvent it, and this one seems to be aiming more for the former, with a specific focus on people who wanted more complexity out of those mechanics. So in that sense, how does it hold up? Well, difficulty-wise, it's definitely somewhere in the original's range. You lose soldiers way less, but you also have way fewer of them, and firefights never cease to feel like life or death struggles. There's a distinctly different feeling to why these fights are hard, though. In UFO defense, it was because you were outnumbered, in a bad position, and had soldiers that couldn't hit a goddamn thing even if it was right in front of them. The balance of numbers now feels more like the remakes, but the individual enemies are tougher and more complex, with multiple body part configurations and locational damage. In particular, disregard the importance of armor and you're on a crash course to Crab City. This was one of the things that made the game almost intolerable for me when it came out, and while the difficulty curve has been smoothed out since, it's still important. You know how Fallout New Vegas had that damage reduction mechanic where if you didn't have a weapon with enough penetration, there were certain enemies that were effectively invincible? It's a bit like that. Armor is something you always have to be accounting for, but there are a few ways you can deal with it. Phoenix weapons tend to shred armor, New Jericho focuses on penetrating armor, certain Phoenix and Anu upgrades go for acid and Synedrian. All of this feeds into a rather strange aspect of Phoenix Point's progression that's so simple yet so bizarrely unexpected for a game of its nature that I didn't even realize it was happening until halfway through my first playthrough. Its tech tree is horizontal as well as vertical. What I mean by that is that unlike the normal XCOM rhythm, most of the equipment you can research or acquire through factions is a specialized side grade instead of a direct upgrade. If you wanted, you could go through the whole game with base equipment, though your battlefield strategy would be a lot less optimized. There's still progression, but there are two ways of doing it now. First, there's the direct progression of your soldiers gaining new abilities and improved stats. This does carry the ever-looming possibility that all of the strength you've been building can be wiped in one bad encounter, but it's still there. The second is what's possibly the most brilliant decision in Phoenix Point, which is the ability to develop a singular strategy. Most new equipment may have disadvantages that keep them from being considered straight upgrades, but they could have deadly synergies together. For starters, there are the obvious ones that exist within a single faction. The Disciples of Anu have many weapons that deal virus damage, which reduces enemy will. Then their priest class has a variety of psychic abilities for controlling enemies and dealing damage, and all of them are more effective against enemies with lower will, bingo bango. But then there are all the synergies you discover yourself. For example, the Phoenix Acid Cannon can soften up enemies, while New Jericho's high-damage single-shot weapons finishes them off. Alternatively, use Synedrian's paralysis technology to let Anu's melee berserkers go nuts without repercussions. It almost turns it into a deck-building game, where having a coherent strategy trumps having individual units that are more powerful. This has kind of been a thing in XCOM before, just with mixed success. UFO defense with its more free-form loadouts gave you some options with how you kitted out your soldiers, even if you ultimately ended up giving everyone heavy plasma with the odd blaster launcher mixed in. In the Firaxis games, most players try to balance the classes, though advanced players may lean more on one or the other. Things like the Long War mod series add a lot more choice, but at the end of the day, your ever-advancing tech level is still there to act as a cushion. Phoenix Point's cushion is much less stable, since it now consists solely of your ranked-up soldiers. Meanwhile, your enemies only get stronger, slowly gaining better weapons, stronger abilities, and this fucking thing. Unlike the launch version of the game though, Phoenix Point now tells you every single time a new variant is introduced, along with a detailed breakdown of its stats and abilities, so it's never really a surprise when you run into one, and only reinforces the whole deck building idea. If the weapons are the deck building of the tactical layer, then the factions are the deck building of the strategic layer. Despite clearly cribbing from War of the Chosen, unlike Bradford merely saying the factions hate each other, Jericho, Synedrian, and Anu actually do, and helping one frequently means pissing off another. I'm sure there's some min-maxy way to get them all on your side, but in my experience it's most practical to pick one to hate you, because getting deep with one faction always means taking aggressive actions against another. And since the factions have all the cool stuff, you're much more actively incentivized to curry favor with them. Selecting which ones you go with starts functioning like picking your class in an RPG. You also have to be a lot more proactive in how you protect them. XCOM proper games tend to be a bit ambiguous with their loss conditions. The 94 game made it a general measure of your performance, Enemy Unknown had the whole give us a satellite or we abandon you thing, and 2 had
Commander, the aliens continue to make progress on the Avatar project. If we're going to slow them down, we'll need to move fast.
Here, your goal is simple. Keep humanity alive. The Coronans attack Havens, which is where the people are, and you lose the game if too many people die, so you have a bit more of an urgent incentive to participate in the old terror missions. I don't think it's an exaggeration to call factions the heart of Phoenix Point's entire macro game. They're your main source of progression, they're how you lose the game, and they're how you win it too. And if you're the kind of person that cares, they're pretty core to the story as well, since they all present different approaches on how to survive and thrive in the newly carcinized world. So, great if you're the kind of person that still debates Empire versus Stormcloaks online. But it nonetheless ties everything together in a manner similar to Enemy Unknown's core rhythm of constantly waiting for your next satellite. In theory, all this could give Phoenix Point much more replayability than any of the other games in the genre. While obviously there's still an active community playing and replaying all the XCOM games, personally speaking, a lot of my love for them comes from memories of my first playthroughs, where I was genuinely going against a dark and unknown force that I was constantly learning new things about. All of these games get substantially less challenging once you know what's going on because the obscurity is part of the challenge. But in Phoenix Point, it isn't. Now you're explicitly told how everything works from the outset, similar to Doom Eternal slapping an info box in your face every time you meet a new demon, which tells me that the intent is similarly not for individual enemies to be the meat of the challenge. Instead, it's more about how everything interacts, so the game kind of over-tutorializes itself to make sure everyone is on the same page before it starts throwing the acid worm artillery beetles at you. I think this contrast is part of why the game struggled to find an audience, even after the Epic Store drama. Taking a quick look at it certainly invites you to think of it like the Firaxis games, with the smaller squads of more customizable soldiers. It's very easy to come in expecting that kind of experience where you're growing your own crop of cultivated badasses, and it smacks you in the face when you realize it leans more towards UFO defense style brutality. But it would be a mistake to say that this is entirely on the audience for having the wrong expectations. There's a strong feeling throughout Phoenix Point that the game is at odds with itself, and not just because the now incredibly important enemy introduction slides weren't even a thing in the original design. For a microcosm of it, look at the soldiers. UFO defense was the kind of game where you could take one step out of your landing craft and immediately get shot and killed by an alien that you couldn't have possibly seen or prepared for. It was brutal and unfair, but to compensate, it was forgiving of your mistakes. In certain ways. If you knew how to play right. One of the biggest ones being that rookies were so easy to replace. In Phoenix Point, death comes similarly easily. The game is constantly throwing new enemy variants at you, way faster than any other variant of this formula. Attacks can quickly cut down your troops, or just cripple their arms and make them useless so often even the Darkness Devil tells them to chill out. But this time, soldiers aren't so easy to acquire. You can't order them in bulk anymore, they have to be hand-picked either from a very limited recruiting list or from individually visiting allied havens. This game straddles the gap between UFO defense-style disposability and Firaxis-style fawning over your favorite shooters, so it's easy to see how awkwardness can result from that. Phoenix Point was sold on its connection to UFO defense, and at launch you could really feel it. If you ask me, the post-launch updates have made it significantly better, but there's been a loss of signal clarity. Games with identity problems rarely hit a mass audience, and with the hype cycle being so core to games being hot these days, ones that reinvent themselves are even rarer successes. I can't promise that Phoenix Point will be the game for you, even if UFO defense is your jam, but if you were skeptical about it in the past or tried once and got burned, I'd say now's the best time to give it a chance. Either because you might like it, or just to see what could have been. Because in another timeline, I think Phoenix Point really could have been the start of something. It still has a community, but it's a quiet one compared to UFO defense, the reboots, or even Xenonauts. All of those represent their own takes on the classic formula, be it slowly dragging things in a more character-driven direction, or a refined but ultimately faithful approach. Phoenix Point had the potential to kickstart an entirely new evolutionary line with a much more calculated approach to strategy, a line with sequels and imitators that press all of the flaws out of its ideas and vary the core concept just like the original '94 alien-killing masterpiece. Could we still see this one day? Time will tell, but I'm not loving the outlook. Well, this one has been in the pipeline a little too long, hasn't it? Thank you for your patience as always. Next video should be a bit snackier. It's something of a personal project about a certain genre I think peaked in 2007. After that, maybe we'll get a little deeper. I've been Rycluse, probably not your favorite Arthron, but in the top 3 at least. Thanks for watching.